Oh boy. Can I have this as a poster? Well, hey y'all, welcome back to Doug's Cars. Doing something a little bit different here today. It's been rainy and nasty here, so I just haven't had time to do a whole lot of things outside, but I was cleaning out a closet and I found this great 1989 Mercedes-Benz brochure for the W124 class here, which is called the 300, with a full technical specification leaflet for their entire range, every single car that they sold in the US at the time. So I'm gonna take a little, I don't know, if you've seen Twin Cam's videos, and I'll go ahead and link to him below, he does a great job of reviewing old car brochures. A lot of them are British car brochures, which I've never even seen before, so they're fascinating. But I know a lot of people in the rest of the world haven't seen the US spec of these cars, which is a little different than what you got overseas. So I'm gonna steal a little bit of his thunder. He does a great job, and I love watching those. So I hope this does not make you too mad, but I've got to do this. This needs to be seen. I'm so glad I found this. This was something that I got as a kid because my dad had a 1989 300E, and this brochure has been in my possession in a box in the closet for 31 years. Let's check it out. Here you can see this. The cover of this brochure is just an absolute beautiful color of like a dark burgundy, and quite contrastingly to the maroon color of the 300 class listed here. This is actually also embossed. You can feel a detent when you rub your finger around here, and when you open this cover up, you can see a difference. I should point out, these were called the 300 class at the time because there was no E-class. They hadn't switched the nomenclature and wouldn't until, I believe, 1994, to where the big seller would be the E300 sedan. But since the 300 sedan was the big seller here, that's what they went with. And that's quite a nice color. I kind of like that. Very thick, heavy paper, very nicely weighted. You can tell this has some money behind it, and that's the kind of people they're bringing in. It's so complete that there's actually a table of contents here that lists the class, the philosophy, the machine itself, and then of course the models and the ownership experience, because of course that's what they're selling. They want an ownership experience with this vehicle. That is a very big deal to a Mercedes-Benz owner. Now here we have that same beautiful dark red color. This one has a sunroof. You can see it's got a gray interior. I can't quite make out the front headlights. That's a giveaway as to what model it is in this country. The 260E was the base model. We'll see that in a moment. It did not have front headlight wipers as standard. They were optional. The 300E did. This is probably a 300E. It has a sunroof as well, of course. When we switch over here to this page, and you get to really see some of the background behind this car, some of the things that Mercedes wanted to share with their client base as to what they would put in it. One of the most important and amazing things, and something that folks overseas might find interesting, is the safety system section here. All Mercedes-Benzes in 1989 had a standard driver's side airbag. One of the first car companies to do that. I believe Chrysler was the first domestic or US car manufacturer to do that, and I want to say that was 1990. I could be wrong on that. I'll put that on the screen if I'm wrong. But by 1989, every single Mercedes-Benz model sold in the US came with a standard driver's side airbag. Now it talks about there being optional passenger side airbags, and I believe that was in every vehicle except for the W201 190. That will be in the technical specs guide that we'll look at after we go through the 300 series brochure here. And now they kind of have a running story over here on the left, and then other information here that is not related to this. And sometimes this story here goes on to another page, and this stays on this page. It's kind of jumbled a little bit, but I think I have paused enough on each page that if you want to zoom in and read this, you can. But it brings up, obviously, the century of history, in this case, 103 years, as this is a 1989 brochure, and the first Benz was made in 1886. So 103 years. Of course, it's a lot longer than that now. And And now these gasoline engines that they're talking about here that replace the horse are being replaced by electric, although there were electric engines back then as well. So here we have, some beautiful photography. This one highlights one of my favorite features of this car, and that was the uni wiper. It's funny that the headlights had more wipers than the windshield had, but that's the way it was. You can also see the US spec headlight trims here that have an inset for the headlight, and then the fog light, which would be a yellowish green color when they were switched on, are separate lamp units. And I'm sure that has to do with some federal DOT regulation. And that's the way they are here. Also, the headlight wipers go inward. And I believe on the rest of the world models, they go the other way. They're also bigger because they cover the fog lights. What it mentions here is that there are 4 versions of the vehicle in the 300 series. There is, of course, the 260E, which is the base model sedan. The 300E, which of course has the bigger engine and some more tech and luxury items. The 300CE, which of course is the gorgeous pillarless coupe that actually has, as we'll see, the body cladding below the lower belt line here, which would foreshadow future models, because in a year or two, all Mercedes-Benzes would have that plastic body cladding below that line, which in this car is simply a molding. And then of course the 300TE, which is the incomparable station wagon that you could get the rearward facing seat in the back of. Here we see the 300CE, and it's not as easy to see in this picture, but I guarantee you'll see it later. That body cladding in a slightly contrasting color, as opposed to simply black molding run down the side, so that you don't get door dings when you are shopping at JCPenney's in 1989. Road and Track has described this 6-cylinder as the best 6-cylinder around, inline or V. Of course, there's a 2.6 and a 3.0 model, and then it mentions the fully independent suspension. Even the 300TE, oh boy. Can I have this as a poster? Let's see. It is, it's not right in the middle. I can't take the staples out and hang it on the wall. That is just gorgeous. I love the color. I love the car. Wow. Back to what I was saying about the 300TE before I was so rudely interrupted by that gorgeous photograph of that W124. The TE wagon is also considered one of the world's most deftly sure-footed automobiles, according to the Road and Track quotes that they were posting here. And I can understand why. It was a great car. It handled very well, and it was a really good riding car for something that had, skinny tires and 15-inch wheels. Engineered like no other car in the world, and back then, Mercedes-Benzes truly were. I think the W123 is the one that everybody thinks of when you think of that phrase, but it really held true to the 124 as well. These cars were tanks. And now we see the interior. There's some information about what everything does and what everything means. This is the interior I remember from my father's '89, which is of course why I have this brochure. The back of the brochure does state that all the seats in every vehicle in here are leather. So those do look a little different, but other than the fact that his was tan and black, we had the same Becker radio, the same climate control system, blanks where the heated seats would be because we didn't have the heated seats, power antenna module. I do think it's interesting that they went to the trouble of making this in Fahrenheit, so the outside temperature gauge, and of course everything's in miles. But they never updated the little wheel for the climate control. So it was in Celsius. And in 1989, unless you were an engineer or something in the US, nobody used Celsius at all. And so I remember the salesman telling my father that 22 degrees was equal to 72 degrees. And so that was a good temperature to set it at. And that's kind of where it is right there, because 22 is right there in the middle of the white section. When you'd roll it down, you have the blue section if you wanted cool air, and you roll it up. Of course, you can kind of make out maybe a little bit of red there. And this car also pioneered the absolutely fantastic power seat controls that we know and love in so many cars nowadays. They've been copied by everyone, and there's a good reason for it. They were the first ones that actually mimicked the movement of the seat. You didn't have 3 chrome buttons, 2 that went up and down, and 1 that was a joystick, like on a GM car. Now, granted, a Cadillac had power seats 30 years before this, 40 years before this even, but that really took that refinement to where it needed to be. And now here we see the engine. Of course, the 2.6 liter was 158 horsepower and the 3 liter was 177 horsepower. So, you know, that extra 20 horsepower probably made quite a difference in acceleration time and just drivability. I don't recall the price point difference between the two. I want to say it was about $5,000. I remember the 300e in '89 was right around $45,000, and I think the 260e started just below $40,000. So you did get other things for that $5,000 in addition to the better, bigger engine, but that was the main consideration, just like nowadays, where you would get basically the same car, but with a more powerful engine from the same company. Here we have, of course, more mechanical and design and talking about isolating vibration and just the standards of excellence that these cars really had. Also, we can see the fog lights are on, even though it's obviously not a foggy day. This obviously is a US market one, where people would drive around like that all the time, whereas in Europe, I'm pretty sure you would be shamed into turning them off immediately. Now, okay, here it's raining, or at least it's a wet skid pad, so having those lights on is fine, I think. But you've got some great CAD drawings of the suspension system here, talking about the multi-link rear end. And of course, as I mentioned before, you still have the running story over here about you driving the car. And then on this page, there's actually information about the vehicle itself. It's just kind of interesting the way they did that, to have that running story that goes several pages long, and then have this information kind of be just on this page. So if you want to continue that story, you've got to turn the page and then come back and read this. It just seems disjointed to me, but that's how they did it. Now here we have a beautiful airflow image, and then this was in all of their brochures forever, picture of a couple S-classes, one with ABS steering around the boxes that were gratuitously placed there like in Top Gear, and one sliding right into them on the wet track. The cool thing about this is there's actually a fold out here with some more beautiful drawings of this car. And you know, you've got even down to the foam in the bumper being shown, side guard door beams. The wiper in its moving position actually would bump out at the corners. It was on a cam. And it was just, especially when I was a kid, so I'd never seen anything like that before. And it was really cool to watch it, especially on high. It would whip around that windshield and cleared like 90% of it. There was no real triangle of doom when you only have one wiper. But well, yeah, what a great car. You see all the high strength steel they used. Anyway, back to this. Go on to the next page here. You can see the crash protection, the rigid monocoque body structure incorporating a network of safety systems. So as I mentioned before, these cars in the US came with driver's side airbags as standard, but it shows here the CAD drawing of the passenger side airbag, which was an option. It took away the glove compartment, which is unfortunate because it was a pretty good glove box and it sounded like a bank vault when the door on the glove box would shut, but they had to put it somewhere. And back then, they assumed that nobody would ever be able to put in a passenger side airbag and have a glove compartment, so they didn't think it would be a problem. But of course, a couple years later, that was no longer an issue. It was put into every car. And now we get into the models themselves. Here's the 260. Interestingly, the little plinth that you would screw the license plate into in the back is missing, but you can see the body side molding, which would go away in another year or so and be replaced with something very similar to what the CE Coupe had. And this has some decontented issues. You've got the smaller engine, you don't have the front wipers. Definitely had the MB-Tex vinyl, but that was also standard on the 300e sedan. You could get velour, which I have never seen in a US spec car as an option, or leather, which I have seen, but the majority of them were the MB-Tex vinyl, which was fine because it felt like leather. And these cars are probably not around anymore, but I'm sure those seats still are. That material just lasts and lasts and lasts. And you can see here, drag coefficient of 0.31. That was excellent for a four-door sedan designed in the mid-80s. I mean, that really was a fantastic coefficient of drag. Here again, we can see it's got the leather seats, as is pointed out. There's no wipers, and there's no power seat control here because the 300e would have driver and passenger power seats as standard. As addition to the options, you can get an anti-theft alarm system, electrically heated front seats. That was just, I mean, nobody had heated front seats other than Volvo, really, which I think came on everything. But again, 158 horsepower. Nowadays, that's nothing. Certainly not a 2.6 liter straight six, but what a buttery smooth 158 horsepower that must have been. The 300E, the car from my childhood that I remember so well that I eventually learned to drive on. But what a great color. It really is. You just don't get colors like that anymore. Everything's gray and silver, and I'm guilty of that too because I have gray and silver cars. But hey, I didn't buy them new, so I didn't get to choose. Again, the plinth is missing for the rear license plate. That's interesting. But you can see the keyhole there that would actually, you would push in to pop the trunk open. You'd push on the front of the gas door to pop that open. And of course, we have the front headlight wipers. Here you can see, again, the leather interior. They seem to have torn this side of the car out, but the power seat controls are there for the passenger on this one. The power antenna, of course, was standard, I think, on all of them. And the 177 horsepower, which it says will do 0 to 60 in 8.4 seconds and get onto a top speed of 137 miles an hour. That's pretty fantastic. And then more specifications. Again, no charge for electric sunroof. So again, I think everyone that I've seen has had one. I don't think anybody ticked the box to say no electric sunroof in a 300E. Rear reading lamps were optional, but it had dual power front seats. Interesting. This is just, the sedan is my favorite design. And I realize that's not how it's supposed to be. Everyone's supposed to love the coupe. And it's beautiful, but this color is just fantastic. It really, really is. It's like a light red with like the dark red underneath on that body cladding. What a beautiful car. And it's pillarless. So you have the 177 horsepower engine and you put all four windows down and you just let in all that air. Of course, it has climate control as standard, but on a nice day, there's nothing like a pillarless coupe, really. Now this is the interior color that my dad's was. He had the mint green color, but this is the leather because it's the coupe, and it came with the leather as standard. It was, again, about $5,000 more expensive than the 260E because it came with more things such as the leather seats, and of course, it had the pillarless windows and all that, and it cost more to make, and it was much more of a niche market vehicle. They certainly didn't sell anywhere near as many of these as they did. This one actually, you could get an electric rear sunshade, which again, nobody had that back then. And then this was a four-seater, so you can see there's a little wooden box there in the console. You probably store tapes in or something, but definitely not a five-seater. If you wanted to take a lot of people along with you, though, this was your car, the 300 TE wagon. Rear-facing seat was an option. Again, only available with the 177 horsepower 3-liter. That's a very sedate color for that. And then you get to this interior, which is just amazing. I think you may know by now that I like this color. I don't know if I'd want it on the inside and the outside, but one or the other would be great. Again, this is the leather according to the brochure. This is the 300, so it comes with both power seats. It's going to have the headlight wipers and the no charge sunroof, which was a metal slider. Moving on to this, we're actually up to page 45. This is quite a lengthy brochure. The benefits of having a Mercedes-Benz. And I can remember seeing one of these once and being giddy as a child because somebody was actually getting service in an emergency situation because they had the roadside assistance and they were one of the first companies to do that. But these cars didn't break. So those wagons probably only had 5,000 miles on them when they were sold and, and became the new E-Class wagon a few years later. I mean, 4-year, 50,000 mile warranty that covers not just engine and drivetrain, but all original Mercedes-Benz parts and systems that are not subject to normal maintenance replacement. That's a pretty good warranty. That's a pretty good warranty today, but for 1989, it was excellent. You paid up for this car, but you got your money's worth. And then on to the back. There's nothing here other than some disclaimers and legalese, but now for the technical specifications. This up here so we can see a little bit better. This is a leaflet kind of pamphlet. So I'm going to have to flip it around to show some of the things, but this is interesting because this is the entire model range for the US market. No SUVs? Oh, of course not, because they didn't sell any SUVs here. As a matter of fact, they only sold the G-Wagon then, And the G-Wagon didn't come to the US until like 2002. So we've got sedans, a station wagon, a convertible, and 2 coupes. The 190, of course, being the base model. Now, I don't know which one you would consider to be the actual base model, but there were only 2 190s sold in the US. The 2.6, which is the same 158 horsepower straight 6, and the 260E, and a 2.5 diesel, naturally aspirated with 90 horsepower. That says it's 16 seconds to 60, whereas the 300E was 8.4. So it's basically twice as slow to 60 miles an hour. Then again, with 90 horsepower, it has basically half the horsepower. So that makes sense. But yeah, the most interesting thing on here though is the fact, especially for folks overseas, that's going to blow your mind, only the 190E 2.6 was available with a 5-speed manual transmission. Every other vehicle on here came standard with the automatic. And I believe that was a no-cost option for the automatic in the 190. That's just the way they came. You could not get a manual transmission in any of these cars other than that. But I mean, these were sold as luxury vehicles. Nobody wanted them with a manual transmission. This wasn't an M series BMW or something like that where you have that type of enthusiast driver who also wants luxury. These were boulevard cruiser, sedate sedans and coupes, and they were not sold that way. When the 124 class first came out in the US in 1986, you could get the 300E with a 5-speed manual. I believe they sold it that way in 86 and 87 only. They only sold a few of them, and I would love to get my hands on one. I went on Auto Tempest yesterday in preparation for making this video and searched the entire country for a manual 300E. No other information, no year, nothing, just to see what would happen. 0 results anywhere. They did not make too many of them at all. Interestingly enough, the top 560 SEL is 238 horsepower. I mean, that's not that much by today's standards, but back then, and you know, had a pretty good amount of torque. We had, what, 287 foot-pounds of torque. That's pretty good. That's going to move you. And the cars didn't weigh as much then either, but 7.3 seconds, and 7.1 for the 560 SEC. That's faster than the SL. That's interesting. So that was pretty good for 1989. For a big 4-passenger coupe like that, that was pretty good. Now let's open this up. Okay, I've got this flipped over so we can see some dimensions here. The 300E, 187 inches long, I remember that. And the 560, 208 inches long. So you get quite a bit more car for doubling your money. But what a cool car those 126s are. They still, to this day, nothing really to jump out here other than there's a lot of numbers. And it's interesting, they of course do trunk capacity in cubic feet. That's how we do it in the US. But they do it in meters squared instead of liters, which is how I notice on UK videos they do trunk size. Liters to an American are how you buy Coke, so if they say a 700-liter trunk, that's 350 bottles of Coke to me. I'll flip this over and you can see the standard and optional equipment. I'll make sure this is flat enough so you can see it all. And again, here you have a picture of the passenger airbag. That's an option in the glove compartment of the 126, the heated seats. You could get heated rear seats on an S-Class in 1989. Again, nobody had anything like that. That's just an amazing thing to have. These cars are pretty complete. I mean, they all came with fog lamps. They all came with outside temperature indicator. They all came with power windows. They all had a lot of features as standard that did not come on vehicles that were sold elsewhere in the world. And that's just how it was done. These are luxury cars, and people expected them to have the content that you could get on a Buick or a Cadillac for a third of the price, because there had to be a reason to buy these. They drove much better than those, but they had to have that level of equipment or no one was going to buy them. And then on the back cover, it just says 1988 Mercedes-Benz marketing. Well, yeah, this is cool. And I'm glad that I still have this technical. This is easier to keep than this, I think. I'm glad I have that because that information is just really interesting, and yeah, I'm so glad I got to share it with y'all. Thanks so much for watching Doug's Cars. I hope you like this. If I come across any other old brochures, maybe I'll do one of these again. This is my first time doing it, so I hope things are fairly legible. I tested it out and it looked okay on my end, so let me know. if it works out for y'all. Thanks for watching. Please hit subscribe. I know that like 84% of y'all are not subscribed to my channel who are watching these videos, and it really helps me out a lot, but I do appreciate the views. Comment, like, do all the usual YouTube stuff, and I'll be talking with y'all soon. Have a good one.